Welcome to the 25th video in the series, Foundations of Communist Organizing. Today we'll be going over the 1922 piece by the Communist Party of Italy, Second Congress, the Theses of Rome, Theses on Tactics, and Theses on the Agrarian Question. I've subtitled this, Unified Program Coordinates Total Revolutionary Movement. In the Rome Theses, the Communist Party of Italy lays out its conception on what the aim and thrust of tactical activity of the Communist Party should be in regard to varying different conditions, nationally to Italy, generally, in periods of revolutionary potential, and in periods of weakness of the communist movement. These tactics aim for the production of a unitary organization, critical conscience and will within its membership and the proletariat more generally, and preparation for both violent, aggressive, and defensive conflict with the bourgeois apparatus. The thesis calls for the party to carry out tactics which allow the party to 1. Unite the working class and lead it to victory. 2. Develop a program and tactics that are connected to the revolutionary aim, no matter the development of the struggle. 3. Be capable at all times to criticize and overcome reformist and opportunistic positions within any kind of organization. 4. Build a united front to address the immediate and vital needs of the working class, while avoiding subordinating the party to any organs. 5. Develop military power. 6. Take independent initiative against bourgeois power. And finally, 7. Develop into a singular major organization that harmonizes all linkages between it and the working class, operating within and leading all forms of direct economic struggle by the proletariat, coordinating and directing efforts in different industries and geographical regions within a nation. The Communist Party itself is a unitary organization made up of elements and groups born out of struggle for the direct interests of the working class as a totality. It transcends the immediate and singular interests of any grouping of the proletariat and brings all objectives into its program under a common banner. It rejects any sectarianism and therefore accepts all of the immediate needs of the proletariat. Despite this, organizations should not merge. There should only be a single Communist Party in a national context, one which is determined by the Communist International, which must itself have the correct program in order to decide between the potential parties. If some sort of consolidation is necessary, then a higher recursion should be constructed and all prospective members go through vetting procedures fit for the highest development of consciousness. And recursion in this case is a cybernetics term that is essentially a higher level of the organization which operates in a similar way to the lower levels. And we might talk about that in a later series in greater detail. I don't have stuff prepared for cybernetics talks so much, but it may be explicated within the PowerPoint series that I will prepare for this series. So, look forward to that. Continuing, the party accrues both factor of critical consciousness and factor of will as a disciplined and centralized organization through collective revolutionary experience by its membership and in its life activity. These factors are not truly grasped by individuals. The lesson drawn from this, according to the ICP, is that the formal ways of selecting individuals to positions, such as consultation of the rank and file through democratic vote, is merely the social validation and surface level of determinations already made before any given vote, and carries within it less of the factors, these two up here, factor of critical conscience and will, since individuals are making determinations with majoritarian electoralism. The process of social validation of these determinations shapes the programmatic content and hierarchical constitution of the party. It can be assumed that they are dismissive towards the social validation process on grounds that it will potentially reduces these factors of party development. Communists within parties that have broken with the proletariat must start debating the program, criticizing the party's response to current situations and pressures, and develop an organ within the party that educates based on these criticisms and within their own hierarchy. The intent with this is to produce a fraction within the party that is able to draw out the party's factors. The thrust of the debate about the program should be establishing that the program needs to have the maximum capacity to win the proletariat to the cause of revolutionary struggle, not just a majority of the proletariat to the party, which cannot be assumed to be revolutionary if it is taking up reformist and opportunist stances. Winning the proletariat specifically and unflinchingly to a revolutionary struggle carried out with the Communist Party taking on the organizational role. This program should educate and present an extremely high quality and developed party, but fundamentally, its aim is to be capable of producing the real movement. This real movement, the real process, is carried out through propaganda and praxis within social struggles, drawing the workers from partial and immediate interests to unitary and revolutionary aims. The party, in these terms, should act as a conduit which channels and incorporates new energies produced by common thought and action, producing this unity of movement necessary for revolution. It does this through taking part in the spontaneous movements of the proletariat, entering into them, and working to educate the proletariat through experience, giving an explanation to the failures of such partial struggles, using the immediate outbursts as a way to develop consciousness and programmatic vision within itself, along with organizational experience. Thus, the party participates in the organizational life of all forms of direct proletarian organization that is not sectarian, which means that the party needs to be able to propagandize within it. It needs to be able to, it needs to not be like bigoted or something along those lines. It needs to allow the party to take action as necessary. Because the program is unitary and not all demands can be achieved, partial interests cannot take hold within a revolutionary party as ends in themselves. Instead, only as a means of experience and training for the revolution. In addition, the party needs propaganda outlets which respond to current events and advise the proletariat of the necessity of creation of new organs of struggle in the face of developments of capital and the class struggle. The party then seeks to enter into these organizations and organizes Communist Party members into cells and groups within them, according to numbers of communists and the character of the organization. These communists are to use their instilled discipline and the resources of the party to propagandize within the organization and participate on the front lines of the struggle of that organization. Through this work, and with the inevitable development of majority support within those organizations, the communists should take a leading position within them and use that to propagandize to the workers the revolutionary position. The Communist Party is a vanguard of the revolution, and its members must be leaders, charging from the front and garnering admiration for their discipline and willingness to sacrifice for the class while educating the workers. At all times, the party is a minority of the class and must be robust enough for individual failures of consciousness and will to not be harmful to the party in struggle. It should accept members from all walks of life and not only draw from one singular source like unions. It should accept links from the broadest layers of the masses who have different ideas about how to achieve the party's goals, and not only accept those who accept the tactics of the party, though they need to be within the limitations of the unitary program, that's to say the strategy. In service to this, the party needs to focus on criticism of political movements that attract the proletariat towards reformist and opportunistic positions, with the intent to draw their membership away from experiencing the failure of these political projects. The format of this criticism should be firstly the explicit demonstration of the inadequacy of such social democratic movements and tactics, and making clear the difference between the communist movements and these. When the Communist Party seeks to draw proletarians away from other political parties, it should take part in direct action alongside the proletariat when there is common ground for action, but also wherein they can carry out more correct tactics, which result in mutual conflict with the other parties with which the party will win out. As a side note, though, this is not generally a particularly effective tactic as has been shown through historical experience. There's a sort of ahistoricity of capitalist society enforced by the bourgeoisie, which harms people's ability to recognize the movement of history, turning revolutionary movements into commodities and recuperating symbols and acts. Capitalist realism, in other words, reification. We need better tools, even if this is maybe the best we've got. What this is concretely saying is, let's say that there is some sort of immediate struggle, where the workers are critiquing something that's going on in politics or anything along those lines. Well, the party is supposed to go out there and have its own unique position that it expressly says, listen, these other movements don't have the correct position, and here's our criticisms of them. Even if, their vision is better than what we've currently got, we need something correct. We need something that leads to the correct revolutionary movement. All this will just lead to failure as it reaches into things because you have no ability to actually move forward with it in a serious manner. And we've got a step-by-step program. Take this pamphlet, here you go, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, these things, they can work to a good degree, but these sorts of movements just get eaten up. Like, look at what happened with Black Lives Matter. And yes, there was not a communist party going in and taking on a correct position and on the ground taking up leadership roles within the movement, within the struggle. But there were people working on those terms, and it did help to a certain degree, but the entire movement just got eaten up by the Democrats, like, bam. So, anyway, continuing. Because of this need to criticize and maintain absolute distinction from opportunistic and reformist movements, communists only join direct economic struggles led by social democrats if the masses as a whole join in, but will agitate within the movement for the correct line. In these movements, the party aims to distinguish the leaders from the masses and lay failure at the feet of the former, while also attacking dangerous and incorrect tactics. It must be remembered that communists do not blame the masses for failures. These lie within the organizational form and the preparation of the tools and forces of revolution, both in terms of recognizing the conditions for revolutionary action and making it clear that the party is the best tool for the job in the hands of the proletariat to carry out said revolutionary action. Revolutionary conditions exist in the world at all times, even if it moves over time and space as capital's contradictions move. Every national communist party needs to be prepared for when their time comes, to recognize the conditions and draw aid from the international proletariat to carry out their struggle. Should victory be achieved, then immediately another nation, which had been offloading its contradictions, will become vulnerable to revolution as well. The party's program is developed out of the experiences of the Communist Party, carrying out revolutionary action, and it guides future revolutionary action, as it acts as the party's real strategy. Tactical rules must be connected to the programmatic directives, or tactics will fail to carry out strategic aims, which were developed through prediction and preparation for various situations, with the tactics themselves being meant to decisively place the party in a position to exercise the maximum possible degree of influence while not overextending. The assessment and analysis of the current situation informs the tactical limitations, based on anticipated situations and phases. This is constantly examined to see if the program's predictions are accurate, and if substantial revision is necessary, and rectification will wildly change the whole party's organism. The historical must connect with the current in order to bring together knowledge of the future. The party waits for situations to arise before analyzing them. Then it does not do predictions. Then it is incapable of learning from history and can only be eclectic and opportunistic, and capable of being a fit weapon for the proletariat. The party's examination of the situation needs to include 1. Assessment of party forces and enemy movements. 2. Assessment of potential support from the proletariat and under what conditions that would emerge. And 3. Analysis of the economic situation and its impact on the masses, especially in terms of production of spontaneous action, which can be transformed into organized struggle. This involves recognizing the ways the economic situation affects the class combativity of the proletariat along with the activity of organs of direct economic struggle of the proletariat, with the aim of understanding when trade union movements can be drawn into revolutionary positions. It needs to examine the trends and tendencies of proletarian organizations and their strengths, weaknesses, and growth potentials based on different economic, social, and political conditions, along with the psychological and material effects on these organizations caused by them. Organizations are examined as regards their position relative to the current form of the state, social democratic at this stage of historic development for the most part, and its trajectory. Tactics also need to prevent the party from overextending, or falling into conservative approaches that simply repeat methods that align with previous forms of enemy formation, such as democratic bourgeois power. This is maintained by keeping tactics related to and in line with the program. Through experience, general tactical norms develop which start as open and unrigid, but become more clear and precise as the movement gains strength and approaches victory. A winning stratagem, slogan, and piercing organizational form picking up steam among the masses and being resilient to counter-revolution. As these tactics become more homogeneous and rooted in the program, genuine centralization develops with the organs being more willing to accept orders. Individuals and groups have the factor of initiative in this way, along with the experience and clarity based on these organs being on the ground, dependent on how situations develop and what arises out of them. They discover and share the most effective ways of engaging in struggle through the real movement. The party accepts and encourages such initiative and adaptability, while also clearly explaining general tactical rules and demonstrates how following them will lead to victory. Quote, "It is therefore a practical and organizational necessity, and not the desire to theorize and schematize the complexity of the maneuvers that the party may be called upon to undertake, which leads us to establish the terms and limits of the party's tactics. And it is for these entirely concrete reasons that the party must make decisions which appear to restrict its possibilities for action, but which alone provide a guarantee of the organic unity of its activity in the proletarian struggle. In circumstances wherein the party is unable to take direct tactical activity, but instead only indirect tactical activity, the party utilizes propaganda as the primary form of activity, but does not constrain itself to that. It exerts influence within other parties and political and social movements with the aim of bringing them to positions which makes revolutionary action possible. It maintains programmatic positions which supports the long-term requirements of struggle and avoids any weakening of structure and influence, while systematically and with prejudice, rejecting any views whereby immediate quote-unquote means are understood as quote-unquote ends. In this situation, should a quote-unquote left political party achieve positions within the bourgeois state, the party should not expect that the government's activity will create useful conditions for revolutionary action or capacity for preparation for such, which is the constant cry of the vote blue no matter who or whatever, and the various liberals who call for people to vote even when they have no stake in things ultimately, because it's a bourgeois government versus a bourgeois government. The common call is, oh, well, organization is more easy under the Democrats. Is it? What kind of organization is more easy under the Democrats? I'll tell you what kind. Class collaborationist organizations, social democratic organizations, non-revolutionary organizations. In comparison, in a certain sense, the Republicans are much better forced to organize under. Yes, it's a blatantly fascistic thing. We move towards political fascism rather than what we within democratic primacies are under, which is social fascism and economic fascism and all the other fascisms besides political fascism, except it's an inverted totalitarianism, so it's functionally indistinguishable when you're looking from the outside, right? So is it actually better? Not really. And anybody who's arguing on that end, if we want to do something like that, then how about instead we push for a third party or something? That would make sense if we're talking about, hey, voting in order to put ourselves on greater organizational grounds, right? Would that work? Probably better than voting for one of the ruling parties, the duopoly here, because that at least indicates to the proletariat, hey, people are actually interested in some other system. but it's the same. But there's no difference there either. Ultimately, it's the same regardless. So, continuing. Instead, the party should denounce the left government in advance and predict its eventual and inevitable reaction against the proletariat, with recent examples of this being the various quote-unquote pink tide governments, which are social democratic and violently repress all proletarian movements, Labour government in Britain, and many more besides. When the proletariat becomes disillusioned, the party needs to have held up the correct position and be prepared materially to absorb sections leaving the left government's banner. When left political parties take up positions, political and economic positions which are attracted to the proletariat, the party does not reject them. Rather, it calls on the workers to accept those positions, but maintains propaganda that the demands will be recuperated by their class enemies and dashed away. The party aims to keep the proletariat's organizational and political independence from any such reformist spectacle, and for the proletariat to demand and pressure the social democratic parties to honor their commitments, so that when they inevitably fail, the proletariat can leave the left government's grasp without issue. In terms of propaganda and the advent of a social democratic government, the Communist Party should 1. Urge the proletariat to move directly to implement the demands put forward by the left party. 2. Highlight and make specific the vague, populistic claims of the left government as real policies to be implemented, and propose the demands of the proletariat as objectives of trade union coalitions. And 3. Take the left government to task, not letting them welch under promises, and call for them to uphold commitments, so that the proletariat understand the betrayal at hand. In addition, in response to the calls from the left for the Communist Party to develop committees to harmonize the party with other political parties, the Communists vehemently deny any such attempts. They instead maintain the distinctiveness of the party and its program, along with freedom of movement to draw in those rejecting the left government and those standing with it who reveal themselves to be opportunistic and in cahoots with the bourgeoisie. In this circumstance, the party leans on the trade union united front to promote combined actions by the whole of the working class, maintaining its roots with the direct economic struggles of the proletariat. At times, the left government will allow fascistic organizations such as white nationalist groups or other such to operate unmolested, while proletarians who struggle against them are repressed by the bourgeois state. Under those circumstances, the party must reveal the dual strategy of the bourgeoisie and in fact identify the liberal side in government as the real and most dangerous enemy in this situation, calling on the proletariat to absolutely reject any alliance and emphatically condemn the left government. At this point, the proletariat needs to be actively prepared for armed resistance, as repression will only increase. Organizing the proletariat for self-defense is an absolutely necessary stage for future revolutionary action going forward. Should the left government call for the proletariat to fight against a right-wing attack, while promising its support, for example various nations in South and Latin America currently, such as those fighting gang-related violence, or the provisional government in Russia pre-October Revolution, then the Communist Party recognizes this is a trap aimed at subordinating the proletariat to the bourgeois state. When the proletariat is armed by the state, the Communist Party should declare that weapons in the hands of the proletariat means the advent of proletarian power and state, immediately calling for the proletariat to take political power and disarm the traditional bureaucratic and military machinery of the state. The seizure of power by the proletariat heralds the defeat of the reactionary forces anyway, so those who seek to fight against such fascistic thugs should join in with the revolution anyway. Any quote-unquote loyalism to the state is to be attacked viciously with all force by the party. The proletariat must be educated about the reality that consolidation of the government's power with the help of the proletariat means the loss of power of the proletariat. Any attempt at disarmament is to be stopped immediately with the greatest of resistance. In terms of situations wherein the party can engage in direct tactical activity, they will carry out all the different actions expressed previously, but in addition, the party itself will take on a military function. There are many demands of the working class that are immediate and vital, but are ignored by social democrat parties. These demands, being desperately necessary for the working class, but are never brought to the table even by the most progressive of social democrats, are hot points, which the Communist Party can push for in propaganda and assist in the development of a united front to address demands for. If any proletarian party such as the syndicalists and the like reject the formation of a united front at this degree of development of the class struggle, wherein the state is weak enough for the party to take direct tactical actions, then that should be used to galvanize the masses against these organizations via propaganda and criticism, which shows the collaboration of social democratic leaders and these other movements, while the Communist Party takes up the positions on the front lines of the partial actions of the proletariat, which the social democratic government will repress. Should conditions arise on a wide scale, with the possibility of dominoing throughout the nation, the party will seek to actively overcome the counter-revolutionaries. Determining this requires a wide-scale analysis which necessitates the party be established throughout the entire nation and directly on the ground alongside the proletariat. If it does not spread from the purely local, then it will be snuffed out quickly. In order to carry out tactics whereby the party can take independent initiative to attack bourgeois power, the party needs to be organized and disciplined, select the correct target, and not be taking adventuristic, terroristic action or propaganda of the deed. Instead, it needs disciplined union forces, which guarantee support from a broad segment of the masses, and any targets that are selected need to increase the masses' confidence in the party and cause growth in support from the proletariat and increase participation as more of the proletariat awaken critical conscience and factor of will. Materially, in order to carry out these tactics, the party requires an efficient, military-type organization with capacity for secret work, along with equipment for illegal activities such as tools and weapons, but most importantly, secret communication. Should the party be made illegal, which is inevitable in the struggle when class struggle sharpens and the party takes on a leading role, then secret work becomes deeply necessary, and the party should be prepared to be able to carry out with experience. Unfortunately, because the direct action carried out by the party itself should only be taken when it derives support from broad segments of the masses, and when it is predicted to produce critical consciousness, general movements initiated by the Communist Party cannot always be directed straight at the revolutionary overthrow of bourgeois power. Thus, outside moments of clear mass support for revolution, the party's direct action instead focuses on critical, immediate, and vital demands that 1. Leave room for the struggle to be halted if it becomes impossible to maintain without compromising future struggles. 2. Are not susceptible to reformist solutions that would disperse the masses' energies, because the bourgeoisie are incapable as a class to give everything demanded and can only offer partial resolutions. And 3. Result in a compromise that leaves both the proletariat and the bourgeoisie unhappy, thereby maintaining the struggle's momentum, or an escalation should general revolution present itself as possible. Should the party detect the possibility of causing damage to the bourgeois apparatus through direct action, even if it is unlikely to cause the apparatus's downfall, it may take it should the party's analysis predict that the action and the harm to the bourgeois apparatus will result in the proletariat recognizing the vulnerability of the state and the bourgeoisie, along with noticing the strength of the party. As Luxemburg said, quote, "Before a revolution happens, it is perceived as impossible. After it happens, it is seen as having been inevitable." A strike of enough power will galvanize sections of the proletariat who previously muddled through in a malaise through lack of factor of will. A strike against the bourgeois state in these terms is not carried out solely by the party, or done through simply a violent attack. Rather, it has demands, which a party had the masses formulate as a series of objectives which specifically are possible, or less than the party's own revolutionary demands, which a party will put forward should emerge successful, and gain position to bargain directly with the bourgeois state and force through concessions. These objectives are arranged by the party in progression, so that the attainment of one creates a reinforced position to carry out the rest, along with allowing greater ability to carry out further action. At all times, the party needs to avoid putting itself in a situation where it is victory or certain defeat. Partial objectives must be formulated to maintain safe control over the action and be recognized as means to the final victory rather than ends in themselves. In addition, while the party will not carry out revolutionary adventurous terrorism, which separates it from the masses, it will carry out active work even when consciousness is not developed. This direct action must be controlled. It involves demonstrative and defensive actions, carried out within armed groups, working class organizations, and crowds engaging in spontaneous protests, which show the masses that organization and preparation can defeat the organized suppression of the bourgeoisie. A particular aim is to counter terroristic attacks by armed reactionary groups and police obstruction of proletarian organization and activity. Under these conditions of lack of consciousness, the aim is not to provoke a general uprising, but instead increase morale, interest in material action, and develop factors of critical consciousness and will. Once a party has established itself, becoming a self-organizing and growing organism with a structured life activity through its programmatic strategy, its aims transition to gaining access to more of the proletariat through linking organs between the proletariat and itself. This includes, for example, within trade unions, cooperatives, savings trusts, and all other forms of proletarian organs of economic struggle and activity. The party aims to create communist groups within these, which then harmonize and link together with each other and with the party supporting work to become the leading role in them. The aim here, beyond increasing numbers of proletarians familiar with and in line with the party and its activities, is to bring all organs into singular, unitary purpose to be wielded by the proletariat as a whole when conditions are ripe. The party also makes sure to expand and maintain the aid committees to carry out their duties to international communists. Though it involves collaboration with other political parties, it can only be in the most temporary and limited sense. As the class struggle sharpens and the party grows, it should anticipate the potential violent counter-revolution of the bourgeoisie. As such, direct action should also take on a character preparation for this. Ultimately, the party needs to 1. Construct solid organizations that are convicted and prepared against assault. 2. Be preparing to utilize solid organization to take to the offensive. 3. Expand in numbers and influence within the proletariat. And 4. Instill coherence, discipline, and preparation within party members. With workers in different industries, the party will take different tactical approaches to different categories of proletarians found in different industries. In order to carry out these tactics, it may involve the construction of multiple organizations, but all such organizations should be under the direction of the shared major organization, which in turn answers to the party, which does not get drawn to partial interests, but instead maintains general interests. In terms of agrarian industries, the party must make a single major organization to 1. Agitate, propagandize, and organize the rural masses. It must organize and unify all propaganda and agitation efforts in rural areas. 2. Connect all communist groups in rural areas. It must organize and unify all local communist movements in rural areas. 3. Have productive connection between this agrarian section and the trade union committees of the Communist Party. It must create new organizations and bring current ones under the Communist Party through internal conquest, Entryism, and then taking leadership positions through essentially having highly advanced propaganda and having highly determined people who take the fore in struggles and thereby garner support. 4. Ultimately, this is part of the task to maximize tactics on a national and international basis. This major organization should be an executive body that implements political and organizational structures drawn up by the party's executive committee. The organization should be constituted in the executive committee, have at least one executive committee member in it, and have its membership selected by the executive committee on the basis of competence in regards to agrarianism. And that is the long summary of a piece that unfortunately it took me a while to get to. Because of the link that I was given, I thought that I was supposed to only be reading the theses on the agrarian question, which is that only those last couple of paragraphs there. But as I was reading the rest of this series and seeing many quotes attributed to Theses of Rome, I realized that I was actually supposed to be reading the entirety of it, and came back to it actually as one of the last pieces in this series, which is unfortunate because this actually answered a lot of the questions I was struggling with deeply with the party's perspective on tactics, which, as I discussed in the preface, my view of tactics historically has been essentially on the ground things carried out by local organizations that have seen something, and then they're very local. If we look at military terms, maybe it is their commanding officer on the ground. They understand, or are at least getting orders from central command, and they are trying to figure out how to carry that out. And you got limitations based on their strategy and stuff, but those tactics on the ground are carried out directly. But what they understand as tactics are kind of what I would more understand as strategy. And then they have a higher level of principles on top of that. I suppose what they would term what I'm talking about here as military maneuvers. But that's kind of the other way around in a certain sense. A maneuver is a large scale sort of thing. So there was, just like the whole question of program actually equaling strategy, this conception of tactics created great confusion within me. And you'll see that later on when I go through my summaries, and I'll try and call this out on myself and make corrections potentially in the midst of it. We'll see how much I need to do of that in later pieces. So with that said, as usual, if you want to find the quotations I derived this summary from, then feel free to go to the description below and you'll find a link to this Google Doc, and also a link to the United Marxist Pact Discord server. If you would like, please join and we can talk about this or any other questions you might have. We would love to have you if you are entering in good faith, and so on and so forth. With that said, tomorrow we will be going through the 1922 piece by the Third Communist International, First Enlarged Executive Committee, Report of the Communist Party of Italy on Party Tactics and the Question of the United Front. Thank you for joining me for today's topical summary, and I hope to see you tomorrow.